Okay, cool. All right, let me start.
Yes, let's go. We're gonna get started.
All right, welcome everyone to our second special topics workshop of the quarter. This one in collaboration with ACM Studio and ACM Cyber. We're gonna be going over some game hacking tools, some general stuff, and all that. So one thing we got to do before Big ACM sent us the ACM census. If you guys could fill this out really quick, we'll give you a couple minutes. I haven't filled it out either, so I'll be filling it out as well.
So valid of you, because I also do it.
Oh,
Really? Yeah.
I lied. I'm standing here watching you guys.
Good thing I don't.
Yeah.
It's more fun when it's random. Now it's just
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, we need the rain for this. I don't like walking in class.
It's fun if you're inside. And you don't have to touch the phone.
I'm the bust. Down with the rain.
Top of the rain.
Yeah, I do it like walking. People have umbrellas, no hood on, walking the class. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, but then my songs get
Really? They never have that.
Basketball one day, I ditch at like 2 in the morning, and I came back and I think part of that room was like or what was on all the
Sweaty.
for like 2 days.
Are we good? You guys?
You guys look like rather interesting. You guys didn't even have to tell the thing else.
All right.
Let's just move on.
I'm gonna say we're good. So we've got the slides here. If anyone is interested in following along or skipping ahead and all that, give you guys a second. All right, let's rock.
Okay, so giving a little bit of background on game hacking before we talk about what we're going to be doing today. Let's just start with the very beginning, the very first forms of game hacking. It's just sort of like stuff that the developers put in so that they can test their game a little easier. So, for example, like the Konami code, or like the up, down, left, right, B sort of thing. Or like putting checkpoints in your game so that you can just test it. So like I do this when I'm making games just because like if you put some like you force something to happen, it's a lot easier to like test interactions if you can make them happen yourself, right? And then further along, you get into stuff like Game Genie and Game Shark, which are like physical devices that you kind of like plug into your game and they're like cheat cartridges. And so they can like they're like pass-throughs that your actual game will go through, and like they can look at the memory address, or memory at specific addresses, and like change that. And so that's how you can like change your, I don't know, health or something, for example, like that. And so this is sort of one of the things we're going to be doing today, memory editing in software. So we're going to be looking at essentially a software that can basically do the same thing, look at memory at specific addresses and then change it. Can I hear this one too? Okay, I'll do it. So nowadays, we also have things like online. So when you're online, things get different, definitely a little weird, because now it's like players sending maybe fake stuff to servers, and the servers have to like figure out what to do with it. Stuff like lag switches, world hacking, and like look ahead and aimbot. And we're going to talk a little bit about like what actual developers are doing to like combat this kind of stuff, especially multiplayer, where it's kind of more important for cheat, like to be like anti-cheat is a little bit more important, because you're not only are you like changing your own experience, now you're like ruining the experience of like other people.
Now this brings us to Cheat Engine. If you saw the list of download, to a program to download before you came to the workshop, Cheat Engine is one of those. So Cheat Engine is exactly what it sounds like, a program that helps you cheat in games. Now the way it works is that Cheat Engine looks into the memory of the game. And once you look into the memory, you can be able to identify and track certain values. For example, the values for your score, your lives, maybe your health, speed, etc. Now, once you have identified those values, Cheat Engine allows you to change the values. For example, you could up your score by like 100 points, or you could set your health so it stays 100 no matter how much damage you take. And then another thing that Cheat Engine can do is interject code into the game, for example, through DLL injections, which we will cover later on in the presentation. Okay, so we're gonna have a demo on Cheat Engine, but I thought, just give a little rundown of what Cheat Engine looks like. Okay, so basically over here, we have a lot of different values that are in the program. And once you identify what value you want to change, like you identify which is your speed value, which we'll go over how to do. You save the value so you can edit it later. These are like your saved values. And then up here, you can edit it. So if you change this to like maybe 50, you can get 50 speed.
Sorry.
Cool. Okay, so demo time. We're going to show you guys how to actually do this and how this works. I believe for just about any single player game, even like AAA games that are coming out today will still work. Is it okay if I sit? Yeah. All right, got it. So I'll back out here. Is it open already, or do I need to open this stuff?
Desktop. There you go.
Okay, awesome, cool. Okay, so I don't know.
And Cheat Engine's already open.
Cheat Engine's open. Great. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be hacking Half-Life 2. Does anybody know what Half-Life 2 is? Okay, we've got some computer nerds in here. Excellent. All right, so it is an older game, but this will work just as well on modern games, as far as I'm aware. So basically the idea for how it works, while this loads up, I'll kind of explain it, is essentially, like, let's give you an example. Like if you want to change your health, right? What you can do is you can tell it to look for all the items that equal the current amount of health you have, right? And then as it changes, we can track all those variables and slowly whittle it down. So I'll give you a look at how that works. So here we are. Oh my God, that's really high sensitivity. Okay, so the first thing we're going to work on is trying to get infinite ammo for, let's say, I don't know, what gun should we do? Anyone got any suggestions? Pulse rifle? All right, sounds good. Okay, so pulse rifle, what we can look on is we want to look for quantitative things where we can see the numbers. So ammo is a good example of that. You can see we have 30 bullets. So what we're going to do is we're going to start our scan by looking for all the things that match 30. So I'll show you how that works. So we're going to go into Cheat Engine here. You're going to go in the top left. And first we have to pick our executable we're working with. In this case, we're obviously working with Half-Life 2. So we're just going to double click that and select it. And yeah, so we're looking for ammo. So we're going to start off with 30. So since 30 looks like we can imagine that ammo is stored as an integer, like a 4-byte data type, we'll leave this as 4 bytes and we'll just go for an exact value. So we're going to ask Cheat Engine essentially to find every value in the memory of Half-Life 2 that matches 30. So if we do our first scan, you can see it takes a second and there's about 4,000, right? So we're a long way away from figuring out what it is, but we're going to slowly whittle this down. So now it's going to hold on to this list and all our future scans are going to work on that. So now if we shoot our gun a bit, now we're down to 25. Now we can ask how many of these memory values in here are now down to 25. And if we do next scan, you see we're down to only 5, right? Which is pretty good. And if we shoot a little bit more, let's see. We can see all the values are still at 20. So I assume if we do a next scan at 20, it's all the same stuff. So this is one quirk of this game that you'll see different copies. One of the reasons you'll see more than one version is because, for instance, in the code, there might be an integer that stores the actual value of your ammo, and then 20 down here, like in your ammo counter, might just be like a visual version of it. So we're gonna have to experiment a little bit to figure out which one of these it is. So we're just gonna select all of them, right click, and add them all to our address list down here. And now we're just gonna start messing around with it. So now that we have this memory, this program lets us just directly edit these values. So we'll try the top one and we'll try changing it back to 30 and see if that works. If I go back in the game, that didn't work. It's back down to 19, so we know it's not this one. We'll get rid of it. Let's try another one. Bad. Try it on 30 again, see if we can get back up. Didn't work again, we'll get rid of that one. And I think the third one should work. So we tried changing this to 30. Didn't work again. Let's try a different one. 30 again. 30. All right. And you can see our ammo's back up to 30 without us reloading. And a really cool part of it is we can go in here. Now we can get rid of these. We don't need to monitor these anymore. Let me make sure this is the right one again. Let's say 30. Yeah, awesome. So what we can do is we can actually tell it to lock at a value. So if I set it to 30, now I can hit this little active check mark here and it'll lock the ammo at 30. So I can essentially shoot forever now. And the program will just keep refilling my ammo for me, which is pretty cool.
So what Cheat Engine is doing there is you're taking that address where we found that ammo counter. We found that the memory address, Cheat Engine found the memory address of where the active ammo counter lives. And we essentially locking it and saying, all right, Cheat Engine, this is an active value. Every time this tries to update, you change it back. You lock this bad boy at 30. By setting it active.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I guess the other thing you might want to use this for is something like health, right? And so it kind of turns into an interesting problem of how do you whittle down your numbers and try and figure it out. So what we can do, I'll go back real quick and we'll save this value. So if we just double click, we can rename it. So we'll just call this ammo. Now what we'll do is we'll mess with our health. So what we're going to do, we know our health starts at 100. So we're going to hit new scan. We're going to scan for all the things that are 100. There's probably quite a few of them. Yeah, about 12,000. Now we'll try throwing grenades and hopefully I won't accidentally kill myself here and we can actually just do a little bit of damage. Ooh, I'm too far away. Let's see. Oh my gosh. All right, now we're down to 93. Great. So we'll try a search for 93. Next scan. We're down to a bunch. We'll try maybe one more. Down to 90. All right, let's see. Looks like all of them match. So we're just going to have to do the same thing again where we experiment with them a little bit. So I'm going to add these all down here. And real quick, does anyone have any questions about how any of this is working? Nobody? All right, great. Okay, so we're going to experiment and see what we can do. So 100. Nothing. So not that one. Try 100 here. All right, and that looks like it works. So it looks like our health is up now, which is pretty good. And what we can do, we'll test out, let's see if we can lock it at 100. And maybe if we go ahead, we might just be invincible to getting shot, which would be pretty nice. Oh my gosh, it does a 360 every time I move it. Yeah, so we'll take a look, see, Scout let us through. And yeah, oh my, dude. I move it 1 inch and it does a whole spin. Let's see, so feels like if I get shot, I should be able to get shot by whatever this is. Or not. Let's see. Let's see if I can eat a whole grenade. Yeah, I'm pretty much invincible at this point. And I believe I have infinite pulse rifle ammo. So the game gets pretty easy, but it's kind of fun to mess around with. So yeah, if you have any games you want to cheat with, we've also done this with like Plants vs. Zombies and stuff like that. If you want to ruin the game and just have infinite sun. So yeah, I think that's about it. The limitations of it, of course, it's all kind of quantitative things. So for instance, like if you wanted to give yourself speed hacks, it'd be really tricky because you'd have to figure out where something like the speed variable is stored. So if you could figure it out somehow, you theoretically could hack just about any number in the game. The trick is being able to display it and track it over time. What's up?
Side question, is there no back for Half-Life?
I actually searched this up because I did not want to get banned on my own Steam account when I was practicing this. So as far as I know, VAC only runs when you connect to a server, right? VAC is a server side thing. So if you're worried about it, go in Steam and just set yourself to offline mode and you'll be fine. All right, so
That's what we've done in the past to demo like CSGO, offline aimbot and whatnot.
Yeah, as long as you're offline, you'll be fine. And Cheat Engine doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't run in the background. So you won't get in trouble for having Cheat Engine on your hard drive or anything like that.
So like for a multiplayer game like CSGO, like are all the values stored like server side?
Oops.
For like health cameras.
Yeah, so CSGO, the issue, well, for one, like VAC will detect this. Like this is the most obvious like cheating ever. And I think we talk about it a bit later on in the presentation online, so I won't go into it too much, but this, I would not recommend trying this with online games. So yeah,
Essentially, every game is going to be different. The way you use Cheat Engine and what you have to do to find the values is always going to be implementation dependent. It depends on what the underlying value type is. You know, it's going to be really hard to search for exact floats, let's say. It's going to depend on what kind of redundancy they have. Like you said, you might have a value that's for the HUD, and like we saw with the health, like there were like 10 different health values. We don't know what each of those do, and so it's just about that trial and error of, okay, let's just start, messing with values. And unfortunately, because every game is different and every engine is different, every time you use cheat engine, it's going to be different for every.
All right, do we want to show them a look at the floats with the other
Yeah.
game? All right, cool. But yeah, so what he was saying, sometimes this won't work because what this is basically relying on is the fact that we know it's an integer. So luckily, Studio has provided us with a
I've
game.
already extracted it.
Oh. It's where?
Second down on the bottom.
Oh, right there, my bad. But yeah, so certain games, like if things are stored as floats, it can be a lot trickier. So we're gonna have to use somewhat more advanced techniques. Give it a sec to load. But yeah, so Studio team, thank you for providing us a game to break. All right, cool. So we're in the game, and so we've got a bunch of stats: attack, HP, crit rate, and speed. So I think what we're going to focus on is trying to have infinite health. So we got 40 right now. So I guess first off, what I'll demonstrate is that we can't really see. Oh yeah, of course. But yeah, so obviously get the executable set correctly. So this, no, we don't need to save that. Okay, so yeah, we'll do a first scan for 40 and we'll get a bunch of results. If I tab back in, I get hit by something down to 30. You check the next scan and you'll see we have nothing left. And the reason is because their game doesn't actually store everything as integers, it's actually as floats, right? So if you have a situation like this where you're not actually tracking the variable anymore, you need to use kind of more broad search terms. So what we'll do, we'll start a new scan. And what we'll go for instead is we don't actually know the data types. We'll just select all. And instead of going for exactly 30, since floats can be a little bit imprecise, if you guys have heard of like floating point number imprecision, it's actually safer to go for a value between like this. So if we're going for 30, we'll aim for everything between 29 and 31. So we'll do first scan. And we're up to about 14,000 results. Hopefully we can narrow that down a little bit by getting hit. All right. So first thing we'll do a check for all the stuff we know. Our health went down. So we're going to do a decreased value check. Just click it right here and hit next scan. Now we're down to 586, not bad. And now of all the ones that started at that value and then decreased, we're now going to check for stuff between the values we're expecting. So we'll say between 24 and 26, do a next scan. And we've got a couple options here. Not too many, but we'll see. So, all right, down to 20. We'll repeat the last section, stuff that decreased. And we'll see we only have one item here. So all these things are down at 0. We know those aren't it. So the one here, that's 20. It's safe to bet that this is our health. So we're going to label this as our health for later. And then let's try to test it. We'll try setting the value to 100. And if all works, we should now have 100 in the game, which we do. Yeah, you can see we have 100 health. Not bad. So I apologize for breaking your game, guys. And if we really want to ruin all the fun, we can hit active. So it will actively reset this value instead of just setting it to 100 once. And now I should be theoretically invincible from all the enemies, right? So I can't die. So yeah, any questions about kind of the value in between, the decreasing, trying to get floats instead of exact pointers? And you'll see it actually is in the type. It turned out to be a float, which was causing the issues earlier on.
Question about the, you know how you said it constantly resets like the HP?
Mhm.
Is it like, how often do you do that and like, how does it keep it fixed? Because I'm wondering like, is it possible like if we were dealt enough damage in one frame, you could just.
Yeah, it is possible. So you might have noticed it in the last demo when we were doing Half-Life 2. I got crushed by a gigantic metal building that was moving. So this won't protect you from like an insta kill because all it's doing is the software literally. We just found a memory address where the numbers happen to line up. So it literally just goes in there and writes the number it wants. But if the code's written so that you take 1 million damage and then it sees that you have 0 health and then it kills you, like writing 100 to that health variable afterwards isn't going to save you from that.
I'm
So, yeah.
not 100% certain, but I think it's on write. So when it's monitoring that memory address, it's paying attention to what its value is. And if the game writes to it, it'll perform that right. It can't prevent it from doing that, but then it's going to immediately update it back. So like you said, if you get dealt one fatal blow and you get zeroed out and you die, it's too late for you.
Yeah, so using the non-exact values is good. Like for instance, crit rate 5%, that might be a decimal, a float. It could be an integer, you don't really know. But yeah, so any other questions about any of that, guys?
So why don't you show them some of the different scan types and some of the different value types we can search for?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I guess some of the other, so we'll do a new scan first off. So yeah, as for value types, we have all your classic intro to programming ones. So we have the different byte sizes. We also have like just binary, floats, doubles, strings. So you can search for pretty much anything. All is especially tricky. If you search for all, it's obviously all encompassing for whatever it is, but it will cause issues. So for instance, if you can have the same address multiple times, but it'll say, go to this address and then take the first byte and then the first 2 bytes and then maybe like the next 16 bytes. It'll be checking to see what could be like a large variable or a smaller one. And so, yeah, we can also do like an unknown initial value. So for instance, something like crit rate, if we don't know how it's stored, we could do a first scan for all of an unknown initial value. And then what we could do later on is we could say, you know, let's like, I don't have an example here, but what you could do is you could say, use unchanged, right? So I'll go back in the game for a sec, let it play. And then we can see of all those items, how many things didn't change. And we can see, you know, something in the hundreds of millions didn't change, right? Yeah, does that, do you think?
Yeah, so when you guys are playing with this, it's just a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of, you don't know what the underlying data type is, so you kind of have to think like the game designer. It's going to depend on the engine. It's going to depend on what they decided the underlying value is. And as you're using those scans, you sort of think, okay, how can I narrow it down? You know, is it unchanged? If you play for a while and you don't change whatever value you're searching for, scan for unchanged. If it's decreased, you can scan for decreased and then in a window. And one thing I recommend, having played with Cheat Engine for a decent amount, is when you can change a value and get multiple scans out of it, do it. So if you increase a value by a certain amount, scan for increased values and then scan for a window or scan for an exact one. That'll narrow down your search space quicker, which is especially useful when we're dealing with, you know, hundreds of millions of values because we don't know what our initial type is. Yeah.
All right. I think we're good to move on, right? All right, cool.
It's really up to you guys. Do you guys want a chance to play with Cheat Engine? Do you want us to keep going? This is for you.
You
guys.
can break their game even further. There's a way to get like infinite speed if you'd like to. I think that's a question for the
I
developer.
can tell you, I guess, because I. Okay. All right. Wait, what's the next slide then?
Yeah, so here, really quick, before we do anything else, we'll just give you a quick demo recap. If you guys have the slide link, there is the actual official Cheat Engine tutorial linked there. That runs you through the whole feature set. Cheat Engine can do a lot of stuff. You can modify instructions, you can do scripting, it's crazy. We're barely even scratching the surface here. We could run an entire workshop on just Cheat Engine. And then some of the pointers that I gave you, you know, try to think about the underlying value type might be, narrow down your search that way. Sometimes you'll be searching for an exact value because you think it's an int. You'll run into a, you know, empty address space because it's not that, and you'll have to try again. Like I said before, try to get as many scans out of a value change as you can, because that'll just, you know, multiple scans reduces your potential values even better. And there's a ton of excellent resources out there. Obviously ask us questions while you're here, but if you are wondering anything else and you want to do the more advanced stuff, there's great resources, great written tutorials, great videos on all of that scripting and other crazy stuff you can do with Cheat Engine. Yeah.
Okay, I guess if you want me to talk about the game a little bit, there's like a download link at the end of the slides that you can use to like actually go to it and download it.
Also on the things to download.
It was apparently also on the things to download. But it's the point of the game is sort of like it's like kind of just a survival game, so you just survive as long as you can.
I mean, do you want to show them? Do you want to play the game?
Okay, sure, I could.
It's
fine. So there's not much of a survival aspect since we have infinite health, but like so originally when this was made, it was for a game jam, and the theme was every 10 seconds. So if you see at the bottom, like there's like a timer, and then like you can basically you can like choose your weapons, and like you get stat boosts. We are artificially boosting our stats by just giving it infinite, but basically the game is just you just run around and try to survive as long as you can. Oh, the store is on the top left. This is literally the game. That's it. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, that's it. I did not make the art. Joanna, you want?
Oh, I just did the weapon art. Izzy did like the background,
Yeah.
UI UX, and I did the
There's a credits on the download link for all the people, but I did the music for the actual game, or like when you're in this game, and a lot of the programming. He was part of our team, obviously, and there's a lot of other people that were on our team, but they did not show up today. That is, we can stand here forever and never die.
Should we move on?
Yeah, we can probably move on. I think we should just go through the whole thing and then let you guys off.
Yeah, you guys can go ham on Femi's Fable
Yeah.
after we're done presenting, and we'll be here to help you guys out.
Okay, so you kind of mentioned this about like back. Actually, this is not the slides that it's on, but it will be later. But sort of like something we're gonna talk about in just a sec is like DLL injection, and it's like the difference between an internal versus an external hack. So cheat engine is like an external hack. It's like a separate process that runs atop of the game process and like checks things like that way. And it's like sort of easier to check because like you can just check if something is like, you can just check what processes are running, sort of like if you have the admin like terms basically. And it's sort of like what what's it called? Like Vanguard? Like that's what Vanguard does, I think, right? Vanguard. So it can like anti-cheat like that can basically just track what is happening and block external hacks out of there. What we're going to talk about a little bit is like DLL injection, where you're just injecting code into the game itself. And that is like a lot harder to track because once like the code is there, it's like you can't like stop it, I guess, in a sense. There's like ways you can do it, but it's like really complicated and like it's this sort of like arms race between like hackers and programmers of like if the developer figures out a way to like stop one thing, then the hacker's just going to figure out some other way of like achieving the same effects. I think the next thing is
Yeah, so now I'll be talking about like what is a DLL. Oh, okay, perfect. So basically DLL stands for a dynamic link library, and it's basically code that can be used by multiple programs at the same time. So you can see that like gear thing is like code that is being used in process 1 and process 2. So it's similar to what's called like shared libraries on Linux, if you're familiar with that. And it's different than static link libraries because it can be like loaded and unloaded during runtime rather than just being loaded during compile time. And they are very, very useful for games because it makes the game run faster because it's like less memory and stuff. And it also makes updates easier because you just need to change the code in one place. And us hackers can also use DLLs to do things that they weren't intended to do with DLL injection.
All right, I'm going to talk really quick about modifying DLLs. And so because DLLs are dynamic link libraries, they're already compiled. They're really difficult to modify without specific domain knowledge, without knowing what exactly that DLL is doing or why it's there. If you're doing that without the specific domain, it's going to involve editing instructions because, like I said, that lossy compilation process, it's already a compiled library that we're ready to load at any time. Pretty much you got to reverse engineer it. Yeah, and they're fragile and difficult to modify because we don't know the dependencies because it's a dynamically loaded library. Whatever process is using it, we're not quite sure how it's going to be doing that, and figuring that out can be pretty tricky. More often than not, unless you have a specific domain and you know how that DLL works and how that DLL interacts with your program, it's easier just to write your own and inject it. This one DLL editor that we can see is Resource Hacker that you can use to modify Windows DLLs. So you can use to change icons, you can do different stuff like that. That's an example of that sort of narrow domain, making it possible to modify those DLLs because it's only looking at specific kind of Windows operating system DLLs and icons and whatnot.
Yeah, so I'll just go through like what DLL injection is real quick because I know everyone probably wants to play with cheat engine. So DLL injection is literally just what it sounds like. You're injecting a DLL into a process. So that allows us to run code within the address space of that process. You're literally like, it is literally code injection. Average Mac user L because it doesn't really work that well on Mac. It's kind of a Windows thing. You can kind of see some complicated stuff. It's probably like, I think someone will go into the specifics of it. So I'll just, yeah. Oop, went too far. Okay, yeah. So here's like kind of like an example of like how you would do a DLL injection. So like first you start with like you want to attach the DLL to the host process, kind of like a parasite, hence like the host. And you do that using
the open process function. And then the next step would be allocate some memory for that, like in the host process for the path to the DLL. And you do that with this function right here. And the third step would be you would copy the DLL code into the host process, and you would finally execute that DLL code. So it's like you can see, it's very injection neat.
Yeah, but guess what? We don't really have to worry about any of that. We have a tool that's already made to do that for us. Hang on, let me close this really quickly. It's kind of bothering me. But yeah. Okay. It's gonna remind me. I can't move it, it's fine. Fine. All right. So basically there are several different steps. So specifically, I'm talking about like DLL injection into Unity. And I've got a whole document on this that I've linked at the very end of the slides that you can kind of go into in a lot of detail. But basically there are several different steps that you have to do. Set up, your projects you want to write or DLL, like Visual Studio or something, like that's easier. Create a loader class, which basically serves to load the DLL into our process that we're trying to attack. And then a hacking component, which basically is what it does, is it looks for like cool functions and stuff that are from like the files we're trying to inject the DLL into, and it calls them in a specific way. Step 4 is the reverse engineering bit that we were talking about. Basically, you have to research your game's functionality to decide how you want to implement tests. You have to figure out what are the functions, what do they do, what can I do with them, and how can I make them useful. And then finally, you can build and inject your DLL. So most of this stuff, steps 1, 2, 3, 5 are pretty concrete. You just set it up, like the first couple steps was set it all up in Visual Studio. 5th step, we've got like a tool called like, sharp mono injector, like let's inject your DLL into a Unity process. 4th step is where stuff gets a little finicky, because that's where things are at least clear and it differs the most from process to process. Because you have to really sit down, you in the game, getting tired, I guess. Sorry. You have to figure out what's going on there. So we're going to talk mostly about step 4. And I am not on the slides for the slides here. And in order to do step 4, you want to look at something called the .NET decompiler, which is basically a third-party tool that you can use to, debug and edit different .NET and Unity assemblies. So what you do is you look into pre-existing DLL assemblies, look at everything is compiled. But what this does is it kind of brings it back into like pseudocode or code form, and you can kind of look inside and figure out what's going on. So there are a couple of very cool decompilers. Again, very cool list on the things to download. DMSpy is probably the best out of all of these. However, it is Windows only. Again, common Mac user L. So I'm going to be demoing everything on ILSpy because that's usable on both. The thing with DMSpy has some very cool features, especially with Unity games, because of how their DLLs work. Again, you do have Luke was talking about you need specific domain knowledge to directly edit DLLs. With Unity games, basically the DLLs that are there in your Unity files are being used only by that Unity game. So you have all the domain knowledge you need. You can basically, in DMSpy, there's a feature that lets you directly edit the DLL. Again, Windows only. So we're just going to be looking at it and figuring out what's going on. So I guess that brings me to demo time, and I'm going to look on my computer. So I've got a screen share over here. And actually, let me really quick the screen. Share my own screen. Oh,
Yeah.
I think I'm close enough. Like perfectly fine. But if people can't hear me on the Zoom, please let me know.
I mean, if you want just like, figures on top of mine. If you just wanted to like throw your laptop down on top of mine, so you're closing.
Oh, that's probably fine. All right, so basically what I have open right here is this is the Visual Studio solution for ILSpy. This is kind of why I don't like ILSpy, but with DMSpy, because what you have to do, especially for the Windows version, is you have to build and run it in Visual Studio, and there are some like dependencies you have to figure out. But I've already done all of that. So what I can do to start it is just click on this little button up here. There's the file spy. And start it whenever it loads. All right, very cool. So what this brings up ILSpy, little about thing. All of these are pretty irrelevant. It just picks a couple, you know, we don't care about them, so we can delete them. What we want to figure out is we want to look into the games. Okay, table. So we can go ahead and we can find our let's start. I've already opened up the correct folder, which but basically what I've done is I've gone into the folder for previous table. And then I've gone into this data folder, which stores a bunch of different things. But what we're really interested in is the managed folder, which stores all of the DLLs, basically everything that's relevant. And the stuff that we really want is we want this assembly C# DLL, because what this has, it has all of the game specific functions. It'll have like, if you have a class for your player that controls all your players' movements, everything that'll be in there, your enemy, they'll all be in there. By default, Unity creates one big assembly and shoves everything in there. You can, I believe, in Unity separate stuff, but you have to do that manually. So we want this, and we basically want all of these Unity engines, DLLs that you call, you know, Unity entry specific functions. So like, I haven't lived in Unity in forever, but I don't know, something you can do in Unity that Unity has built in, that's where it is. So I don't feel like selecting all those, so we're just gonna open everything. So what it's doing now is it's decompiling everything, which might take a little bit. But yeah, what we want to look at is assembly C#. So we can pop this guy open right here. You can see metadata referencing to this little curly bracket, and that's what's cool. Because when we pop this guy open, you can see basically the game's patterns. Like, to those of you who are familiar with the game's code, who wrote it, this might look pretty familiar to the stuff that you wrote, because it is exactly the same. So these right here, these will be your classes. We can look at, you know, enemy behavior as one that might be of interest to us. And then we can see basically everything. We can see these are all of the functions the enemy can ever help ever. Both private and public, you can see kind of with small that the private functions like flash white have this little lock by them, and the public functions are just ordinary, but you can still see them all just the same because they're still in the DLL and trying to look at their status. These right here are your variables for your class. So, you know, attack, cooldown, HP, basically everything an enemy could ever need. And then I believe you can also see, we're looking at enemy behavior specifically. You can see whatever enemy behavior was based off of. So we based on a couple of different, you know, Unity classes, behavior, etc. And then you can also see derived types right here. So apparently this game has two different types of enemies, melee enemies and ranged enemies.
I wonder how you put the range enemy code.
The ranged enemies.
It should be empty.
Oh. Well, it was supposed to have two different kinds of enemies, and then it took me 2 hours time for it. But
Features.
maybe you can implement.
Sure, you end up one.
But yeah, you can see all of the derived types. So I guess we can go ahead and take a look at one of these things. So I'm going to open up player behavior because that's kind of interesting and fun to me, and I want to see if I can do something like the cheat engine people were doing, like infinite help, but with DLL injection. So we can go ahead, we can look around at some of these functions, and we can see that there is something like this, refresh player stats control. That basically what it does is that's, you know, everything back to normal, and you can also see refresh health. It just has HP to max HP. That's a function built into the game. It's probably called somewhere. I'm not entirely certain where, but you can search for it. Just kind of quick search and you look for the function. The function is of interest to us because if we call this function, we can effectively do what they were doing with cheat engine, which is give ourselves perma full HP. And do that without getting caught as easily as cheat engine would. So actually, I'm gonna take you guys over here if you want to kind of follow along with us a little bit. Scan that if you want. That is gonna have a very detailed guide of like all of this stuff that you can follow along later or follow along now. Probably should probably scan it at the beginning, but what I'm gonna kind of go into now is this is basically, I'm gonna take that function, I'm gonna build a DLL, and I'm gonna inject this into the game. Hopefully everyone has that, that way it's gonna be shown anywhere in the on the slides. But yeah, we can just go ahead. Function. Okay. And but in order to call a function from their behavior, we've got to check how this works. This called in here. You can look for refresh help. And we can do but unfortunately, I do not use that aspect of that. So I will the exact location I would look for that. But I believe we need to create a new instance of class player behavior, and then we can just post it pretty easily. All right. We'll go back over here. And we can just go like behavior. So,
I have to give it the title.
oh, sorry, that's my bad.
I've also friends.
Okay, that is my bad. But yeah, now that we have that, we can just go in here and we can go player behavior, refresh, which function we found using IL5. We can save that, and then I have already pre-built the DLL for this. But what we could do is we could just go to build, and then you could just build it. So we go ahead and look at the game.
So pretty much what she's doing is we're building a new DLL that we're giving the game. We're injecting this particular DLL
Right.
to call functionality from another one. Because that function and those functions are in the code base already. She's just using the new DLL that she just made to call it and use it.
Yeah, and this is less easily detectable like something like cheat engine because it's not an external class. It literally just becomes a part of the different game. So this is again, once again, Windows only, but this is what our such sorry about that. Oh. Great, let me go ahead and find the assembly. Okay. Okay. So this is the pre-compiled one that I had before. It basically did the same thing as what I'm doing now. So I can grab that. It's found our process being stable. I didn't really show you this very properly before, but all the code is again in that document that I linked. We have this is our hat file basically, and then this is our loader that lets us load and unload the DLL. And then what we can go ahead and do is we can fill this in with the loader and load to load our DLL and go ahead and load to unload our DLL. And we can just, I'm not going to inject it right away because we'll go ahead and play the game and see what happens when we get hit right now. So we're taking damage, that sucks. I like to cheese every game that I do. So we'll go ahead and load that in. Common enemy. failure. Look at us, we're doing fantastic. We can just sit here all day. And this is basically the same thing that we did in Cheat Engine. You might think, why are we doing this? Like with opening up Visual Studio and like digging through this code and trying to call a specific function, when we could just open up Cheat Engine and it would happen like a lot quicker and a lot easier. Again, this is a lot more undetectable, but also DLL injection, you can do so much more with it and a lot like easier than you can with Cheat Engine. Again, this is barely scratching the surface of what you can do. You have access to basically everything in Unity and every function has already been written in the game. So what you could do is basically automate the entire game if you wanted. And then you could just sit there and then let this little guy run around and like hit enemies, and then you wouldn't have to do anything ever. Which is honestly optimal. I hate doing things. So that is basically a really quick overview of DLL injection, and we can go ahead and uninject this DLL. Again, with DLL is dynamic reviews, you can take them out or in whenever you want. So if we were to go ahead and play, we would start dying, and that would really suck. Look at that skill issue. That's basically a really quick coverage of this. Again, there's a very detailed document that goes over all of this in detail, and then we can really help you out if you want to try this out on your own and do something else, something cooler. Yeah, I will bring it back over to Luke's screen, I guess. Does anyone have any questions right now, by the way, about what I just did? I know it was kind of a lot. And it was a lot for me when I first saw it. If we don't right now, we'll probably have time and actually to just go over a bunch of stuff and you can ask questions one-on-one. Yeah, I think that's all I have about. Yeah, go ahead. Next one. Yeah.
Okay, so last thing, just before we let you guys have your own fun with Cheat Engine and trying to do the DLL injection yourself, is what can we do about hacking, right? So obviously, these are like all things that we can do to like hack our game, but like what can the developer do to prevent it? Mainly, it's a concern in multiplayer games. I think in single player games, usually you can just like Cheat Engine stuff, and it's like probably they don't do that much to against it, because in single player games, if you're cheating, not that you're rooting, I mean, you can have fun with it, you can have fun with cheating, but like, you know, you're rooting the intended experience, I suppose, for yourself and not for anyone else. But, and like, when you're playing Valorant, for example, you have aimbot, obviously you're just ruining the experience for the enemy team. And in some ways, you're also ruining the experience for your own team who can't really play your game anymore because you're just killing them. So the main way, especially in multiplayer games, that a lot of servers do anti-cheat is by checking the player's actions on the server side. And so instead of clients, like the client side saying, oh, here's where I am to the server, the client says, this is what I did. And then the server will say, okay, this is where you are now. There's other stuff as well. So like calculating line of sight for checking wall hacks. So like if you're shooting something that probably should be able to see, like as a player, that might indicate that you're like wall hacking, for example. And limiting information to the client as well. So for example, fog of war is like a pretty obvious one. When the player doesn't see something on their client, they shouldn't have like information about like that I can say object. So an example that we have here is like enemy positions when you're in fog of war in like MOBAs, for example. Other methods as well, asset validation to like check the actual code itself, see if you're not running anything that you're not supposed to. Another method that a lot of games do is like kernel level stuff. So for example, like I was talking about before, Riot Vanguard is like a kernel level process that just checks what processes your computer is running. And if it detects something that is suspicious, it might just flag you for cheat. Replay review by like actual people is something that works like pretty well, because a lot of times people will be able to tell like if other people are cheating by just like by just watching their games and saying, hey, this does not seem possible for like a normal person. Versus just being like really good, right? It's pretty obvious if you're like flicking like crazy. Maybe like once or twice, it's like, oh, maybe he's just like got lucky, I was pretty good. But if you're flicking everywhere all over the place, you're definitely cheating, right? And also, using machine learning. Machine learning is in everything every day nowadays, so always we can try to make AIs do things for us. I think that is about it. If you go to the slides, there's like a link to the itch page with the hack version of the game. It's not that much different. There are flags, but I don't think we ever like implemented on your guys' side. So you can get them for yourself, but I don't think there's a submission for you. But that's basically it, yeah. I think we both, Cyber and Studio, have feedback forms.
Didn't enjoy filling out the one form, fill out the read.
Yeah, you can fill out 2 more forms. The Cyber feedback form and the Studio feedback form are both at the very ends of the slides. If you're on Studio, I say that I know who's in Studio here. So for you people in Studio, if you're on Teams, I think you guys can actually. I think interns, you guys count as still getting. Does he say you can still get points for SRS teams? Yeah. Oh, for the social, those count. For going to the workshop. I don't think you guys can. I think it's cheated. Especially because, for example, Grace is going to be teaching the next one, right? So she can't get points for her own workshop. So. Do you think you count? Would you be able to get points for your team? That's cheating. The Cyber feedback form. Studio feedback form here for those. A couple of you in Studio.
So yeah, we got assorted feedback forms. We got links to all the tools we use. Links to some of our documentation, links to tutorials.
Oh my god. So yeah, there's a lot of like demo code. Sama did a great job hacking the demo that she just did just now. There's like a document on like a write-up on how you guys can do it yourself. Anything else you guys want to add?
If you guys download Cheat Engine and try to install it, Windows Defender will flag it as a virus because the entire purpose of the program is to edit other programs' memory, and Windows is like, are you sure you want this? It won't do anything bad, but just be aware that you might run into installation issues because Windows Defender or assorted other antivirus might.
This is something I did forget to mention. This thing has a password. What was the password? It's like CyberX Studio 23.
Yeah, so if you download Cheat Engine, just tell Windows Defender to allow Cheat Engine to do whatever it wants and trust in the system. Totally
Trust the open
no
source.
virus. Free robot stuff.
How much of this like applies to game modding?
Game modding.
I think as far as I understand, when it comes to game modding, most of it is allowed by the developers, whereas pretty much everything we just showed you isn't allowed. So I know there are some game mods that are like, I know there's some I'm aware of, like I think CSGO has like a Halo mod I'm aware of, where a lot of it relies on them breaking the game and doing stuff you're not supposed to do. So knowing how to do this can help modding certain things the developers don't want you to mess with, but a lot of mods are within the confines of what the developers intended. Does that answer your question?
If you're ever interested in modding games as well, you're definitely gonna need to use something that kind of about specifically in reverse engineering and figure out how it already works if you want to build something else.
Like finding those functions, calling them yourself. And unfortunately, we're the ultimate fallback with all this stuff is it depends. Every game is going to be different with its modding. You might have officially supported modding tools, in which case you don't use those. Great. If you don't have those, you might have to cheat engine and script stuff up that way. You might have to do DLL injection to do whatever modding you want to do. It's always going to be different and depend on what game you're trying to mod.
Also, if your game is intended to be modded, usually the developers will have sources for you to just do it through intended methods. But I guess if you're trying to mod something that's not intended to be modded, it's probably going to be more stuff like this or stuff.
But don't let that stop. Get in there. Mod those games.
Only let it stop you if you get, I guess, backbanned.
Be aware of using Cheat Engine on online only games. When in doubt, throw it in offline mode. And we're not responsible for y'all getting banned.
Cyber is not responsible for getting banned.
But it works on a lot of stuff. I've used cheat engine on a lot of games. There are very few that it doesn't work for, I will say. But yeah, just careful with the modern always online stuff because they've got more active anti-cheat in there, and who knows who's gonna put anti-cheat in a single player game, but someone has and someone won't, so.
But how can a server check whether like you modified files? Does it like compare like your files to like a server side?
No, it'd more be like, for example, if you have done some modifications so that like, for example, your, I don't know, health is always like staying the same when you're getting hit. It would be able to validate that you got hit, but like nothing happened to your health, right? So it'd be like, there'd be some sort of like not, I don't know what the word is, it's like not synced properly. So the server is always gonna be right? So if you're messed up, it either means like maybe packet loss or something like that, or you actually are cheating, right?
That and hashes,
Yeah.
like asset validation, a lot of that is like, we, took our file, we hashed it into whatever, hashed string, and it's gonna validate that again. So it'll take whatever file you have modified or unmodified, hash it again, and if it doesn't match, then it knows you changed it. Cool.
Okay.
Guys, go.
Have fun. You guys have fun.
I want to stop those for you. But yeah, we have